Hello everyone, I hope you're having a great day. In this video, I'm going to break down another trailer, this time the trailer for the 2019 horror film Midsommar. I'm definitely pronouncing that wrong, but it's something like Midsommar, only in Swedish, directed by the director of Hereditary, Ari Aster. Aster's last film, his first feature film, Hereditary, was my favorite horror film of last year. I thought it was just a great mix of well-written, well-thought-out characters, an intriguing plot that kind of draws you along, and I also love the way that it kind of mixed in occultist mythology or concepts to kind of add a esoteric element to the horror. So when I heard about this new film, I was excited, and this time around, Aster seems to be going in the direction of folk horror, which I'm a big fan of. Although typically folk horror is associated with British folk horror, the prime example being The Wicker Man, the 1973 Wicker Man, not the 2000s Wicker Man with Nick Cage.
No, not the beast! Not the beast!
But from what we know of the plot so far, this is set in Sweden, so it's a Scandinavian or Swedish folk horror. But let's get started on the trailer.
Christian says that you've got some special thing planned.
Yeah, it's like a crazy 9-day festival. It only happens every 90 years.
So in the first part of the trailer, we see that they are going to a crazy 9-day festival that happens every 90 years. So these people that we see arriving are backpackers that are going to this Swedish festival, which, by the way, based on the title, is an actual festival. Midsommar is a big deal in Sweden. It is their version of the May Day festival or St. John's Day festival, and most people believe that it has its origins in pre-Christian pagan rituals. There are many different variations on May Day all over the world, but generally speaking, it's a fertility festival that usually has some rituals in common despite where it is. The most prominent would be dancing around the maypole, but in the Swedish version, Midsommar, it actually happens in late June, usually around June 24th, and sometimes takes place over a number of days. As we hear in this version, it takes place over 9 days. The Swedish tradition, as it is now, usually involves a lot of drinking and games. People will dress in white, as you see they're dressing here. They'll usually have wreaths or garlands, which is like the wreath of flowers around their head, which is a fertility symbol. They will typically dance around a maypole and do crazy dances like the frog dance. So, as it is now, it's generally a good time that you should participate in if you ever go to Sweden during that time. But in this particular movie, I think they're going to a very backwoods kind of area, somewhere pretty far away from Stockholm, in some sort of very strange rural area where they have their own variation of the festival. And as you hear them say, it happens once every 90 years. I'm not actually sure what the significance of that is, but if somebody knows a cosmic event that happens every 90 years, please let me know what that is, because it may be tied to their festival that they are referencing here. And then we have the A24 logo with a bunch of flowers. Flowers are associated with the Midsummer Festival in Sweden, and again, it's sort of a spring fertility thing, but in Sweden it actually happens in late June. It has to do with the fact that things don't really bloom when they usually bloom in other parts of the world, so they kind of moved the festival more to midsummer rather than spring.
Hi. Hello. Theodore.
So we have the shot of a woman talking to someone, talking to us in a POV shot, and she has a very kind, nice look on her face, as people in weird cults tend to have. And in between, we see some shots of these villagers all dressed in white. The women are all wearing the garlands, the wreaths around their head. But at this point in the trailer, everybody looks very smiley, everybody looks very pleasant, and I'm sure it's right before the backpackers are meant to sip the Kool-Aid, so to speak.
You can't speak?
So in these next shots, we see Florence Pugh, who plays Danny and the other backpackers in some sort of a dormitory where I'm assuming they are staying at this festival, and then a illustration depicting a ritual of some kind. I'm assuming, giving the history of the Midsommar Festival, it is a fertility ritual, and as we can see here, it's a bunch of women or girls holding torches in the sea, and there is a flaming pyre of some kind behind them, which could be something like the bonfires that are usually associated with St. John's Eve or Walpurgis Night. A lot of the elements we see here are typical pagan elements: fire, water, earth, etc. And I'm not sure exactly what the ritual signifies, but I'm guessing it is a fertility rite for the women involved. And then we have a shot of the festival participants dancing around the maypole, which itself is a symbol of fertility. It's often associated with the phallus.
The phallic symbol. That is correct. It is the image of the penis.
What?
And it's further adorned with greenery, flowers to signify a good harvest, as well as fertility among the women participating. Maypole obviously signifies May Day, but they may also call it a midsummer pole, just because May doesn't really make any sense in this context.
Move.
And then here we have a illustration of some girls dancing around the maypole or the midsummer pole with flowers on their dress, again a sign of fertility. And on the side of the image you can see images of sexual activity, sexual positions. So without a doubt there is some sexual activity going on in this festival. The origins of the Midsummer Festival in Sweden are thought to have to do with the Norse gods Freya and Freyr, who are both gods of fertility and brother and sister. Freya is like the female god of fertility and sex. Sometimes she's associated with Frigg, Odin's wife, and some people believe they are the same god, but it's not completely clear. And then Freyr is her brother, who is kind of like the male version of fertility, or rather virility, usually associated with harvest, prosperity, and usually in sculptures there's a bit of a phallic element to him as well, which would tie him into the whole maypole thing.
But this opens you up.
And here we have one of the backpackers. I believe this is the actor Jack Rayner, and they have put him in some white robes for the festival, and they are now giving him some sort of a intoxicating elixir of some kind. Who knows what's in there, but I'm guessing there's some pretty hard psychedelics in that particular mixture. And on his robe here, you can see there's a rune. It just looks like an upward arrow, but it's actually the T rune, which is associated with the Norse god Tyr, and it can also mean just God in general. This rune can also signify a warrior and can sometimes signify something like self-sacrifice. So I'm not sure exactly what significance it has that he's wearing that robe, but I suspect they're going to make him participate in some sort of ritual. Probably has some sexual element to it, I mean, let's be honest. And they're trying to make him become a god or invoke one of the old Norse gods.
The influence.
And here we have a shot of Will Poulter, who is the character Josh. I believe he's another one of the backpackers, looking kind of distressed at what's going on at this festival. And behind him there is a large wooden barn, although I suspect it's actually a temple of some sort. It looks appropriately creepy and ominous though. More shots of the smiling cult members. And here's a shot of William Jackson Harper, who plays Mark, another one of the backpackers. And as you can see, one of the village elders is reading some sort of a passage to him. And if I was there right now, I'd be telling him to get out. It's also interesting how so many of these shots are POV shots. We keep seeing people looking at the camera as though we are one of the characters. So which character is it that we are seeing from the perspective of? I'm not sure, but it's interesting that it seems to be a running theme throughout the film.
Down your defense.
And maybe this is who we're seeing from the perspective of this, what appears to be young woman, or woman anyway. And I actually suspect this character is someone we're going to see later with sort of an interesting face, but we'll get to that. As we can hear from the woman speaking to us in the POV shot, she says that this will open you up and remove your defenses, talking about some sort of a drug or an intoxicant of some kind that is quite possibly what they give to their potential sacrifices. And here we have another illustration, this time all men. It's interesting, the last time we saw an illustration that was all women, perhaps signifying the female role in this fertility ritual, and now we're seeing the men signifying their role, and as you can see, the guy in the foreground appears to be slitting his wrists. The Norse actually did do sacrifices, and typically these were just sacrifices of crops or of animals, but they could also be sacrifices of humans. Sometimes these were voluntary sacrifices, and sometimes they weren't so voluntary. And the symbols to the left and right of the illustration are also runes. The one to the left is the Perthro rune, which can mean something like fate. It's associated with the Norns in Norse mythology. And the rune to the right is the Odal rune, or Otala rune, which means something like nobility or homeland, sometimes inheritance. So it could be something like destiny, inheritance, going left to right.
Trust me.
Again, more creepy looking, happy cult people. There's nothing more creepy than people smiling at you warmly when you know they're going to do something horrible. That is just far more scary than people looking evil. Okay, so this is an interesting shot. This is somebody wiping blood. I'm assuming they've slit their wrists and they're wiping blood on this runestone. And they've obviously made this runestone for the film, but there are runestones like this throughout Sweden and Scandinavia. The person almost looks like they're decapitated, which, if you've seen Hereditary, is maybe a usual thing for this director. But I actually don't think they are decapitated. I think they're just bowing their head. The runes are an alphabet, so if you put them together, they spell words. But they are also used for things like divination, spells, etc. So I'm assuming that's what this is. It's some sort of a spell or a rite of some kind. And each one has a name and a meaning associated with it. So I'm going to do my best to decipher the runes on this stone. And I apologize in advance for mispronouncing some of these names. Going top to bottom in the middle row, the first rune looks like the Ur rune in the Younger Futhark, which is the rune language associated with Old Norse, and generally the Viking Age. The rune itself means something like yew tree or roots, and in this case it may actually symbolize the maypole. But I suspect they actually aren't going to be so strict with the runes they use, and this is actually an Anglo-Saxon rune, the rune Kalk, which means something like chalice or offering. The second rune down is the Raid rune, which translates as ride and is associated with a journey or a transformation. And the third rune down, I can't see the bottom of it because it's obscured, but I suspect it's the Quoth rune, Anglo-Saxon rune, and it can mean something like fire and cleansing through fire. So going top to bottom, if I had to interpret it, it might mean something like chalice, journey, fire. In other words, maybe offering through fire. And then from left to right, we also have more runes. It appears to be another R on the left, ride. Maybe it's something else, but we can't see because the hands are in the way. And then to the right, there is another T rune or Tia rune, which again means something like God or warrior. And then in the corners, you can see this X mark, which is the rune Gabo, meaning gift, also associated with marriage. So could have something to do with the ritual being a marriage of some kind. But I'll admit I'm not an expert on runes, so I may have misinterpreted this meaning. Or it could just be they chose random runes, who knows. If you want to learn more about runes from an expert, check out the videos of Jackson Crawford. He has some great videos on runes. So here we have this girl doing a breathing ritual, and we've actually heard this throughout the trailer. I'm not sure what this is, but I'm sure it's some form of ritual. Actually, what it makes me think of is throat singing, which is something that various indigenous populations do, but a culture native to Sweden, northern Sweden, and actually northern Scandinavia in general, are the Laplanders, or Sami people. They're like an indigenous population of hunter-gatherers that live in northern Scandinavia. They have throat singing, so it might be associated with that, although these people don't look Sami at all or Laplander at all. In any case, I believe it is some sort of a ritual, a preparation for the ritual that is about to take place.
All right.
And then this very pleasant woman is just saying, all right, with a nice smile. Again, so creepy. And here we have a shot of what appeared to be the elder that we saw earlier. The guy reading the book, only this time he's wearing a mask. We can't actually see the mask, but he seems to be entering the temple that we saw earlier. And this is quite the jarring shot. Someone with quite a disfigured face. It seems as though they have had some sort of an extreme allergic reaction and their face is puffed up.
Not the beast!
But I'm sure that's not by accident. It's possible they were given some sort of a drug of some kind for the purposes of the ritual, or perhaps they are simply disfigured in some way. So in this shot, we are inside the temple, the triangular barn structure that we saw earlier, and seeing inside it, it's full of hay, and they're carrying around torches, so I'm assuming its purpose is simply to be lit on fire. I believe they just constructed it for the purpose of sacrificing people inside it, although we see two figures to the left and right which appear to be effigies of some kind, perhaps to Freya and Freyr. In the background, quite prominently, you can see a rune displayed, and this rune is the symbol Gar, which is associated with spear, specifically Odin's spear, Gungnir, and can sometimes be associated with sacrifice, in the same way that Odin used his spear to sacrifice himself to himself. This symbol, meaning spear, can represent that as well. And you can't really see it very well, but to the left, you can just barely see a guy leaning back, dressed in white, who looks kind of drugged. Potentially this is one of the sacrifices that will be in this building. And then here we have a shot of William Jackson Harper, who we saw earlier, and somebody has either struck him or attacked him. In any case, it's not going good for him at this point. And a shot of all the villagers looking up at something. I'm assuming it's the building, the temple, which they are now lighting on fire. And this man here also is carrying a mallet, which was used to do God knows what. Perhaps it was just to erect the maypole, but I have to suspect it's something worse as well. And then here we have these pairs of girls facing each other, again doing some sort of a breathing ritual like we saw earlier, and they are wearing the wreaths, the garlands, so I'm assuming they are participating in these fertility rites. And here's a quick shot of Florence Pugh looking like she's trying to escape. Something tells me it's not going to be that easy. And a shot of this elder man and woman who appear to have some special significance. Perhaps they are religious leaders, priests, perhaps they are representations of Freya and Freyr. And then another shot, it actually appears to be the same shot, just pulled back more, where everyone is about to feast, and this includes some of the backpackers, as we can see on the right, who are just wearing their normal clothes, not their white cult clothes. And here's a shot of some of the villagers dissecting a bear. Like I said before, Old Norse sacrifices often include animals, so that could be what we're seeing here. I suspect what they're doing here is something called haruspicy, which is a form of divination which involves looking at the entrails of a sacrificial animal and reading the results in them. From my understanding, it's an ancient Roman practice or Etruscan practice, and I don't know if there's any association with the Norse religion or Germanic religion, but regardless, that seems to be what they're doing here. And here is a quick shot of somebody falling from very high up in the sky. I almost think this is a psychedelic sequence because, as you can see, behind these mountains there is some sort of a plank, a stone plank, that is protruding out from the mountains, which seems unrealistically huge to me. There are cliffs actually kind of like that I've seen in Norway, actually, not Sweden. But still, it seems to me that this environment is completely different from the environment we've been seeing this entire time, so it's probably part of a psychedelic sequence after one of the participants of the festival takes these psychedelic intoxicants. And then here's another shot of Florence Pugh looking very upset that she went to Sweden. The smiley cult lady that we saw earlier, and Jack Renner again, who appears to be looking at this girl here. And in this shot, the girl seems to be disrobed, and she is laying on a bed of flowers, so I'm assuming this is some sort of a part of the ritual, which is probably sexual in some way.
You're gonna love it.
one of the village elders wearing a wreath blows some sort of a powder into our faces, again from the POV shot, so as if they're giving us the drugs. And the final shot is what I think is Florence Pugh again. She is wearing one of these festival outfits in white with the flowers, and she's looking through a keyhole and hearing a lot of distressing sounds, which again is some form of ritual, perhaps a violent one. It's hard to say because we can't see it. So that's the end of the trailer. I hope my comments were able to give you some insights into it, although please note that I am just doing my best to figure it out, and I don't really know what the story is going to be. I'm just guessing. In any case, I'm very glad Ari Aster is making another movie so soon. I think he could go on to be one of the great horror directors, horror filmmakers, up there with John Carpenter, Wes Anderson, David Cronenberg. I am very excited to see what he'll do next, and it's interesting to me that he's delving into Sweden and old Scandinavian pagan beliefs. I thought the way he balanced the sort of occultist aspects and mythological aspects of Hereditary was one of the more interesting and intriguing parts of the film, and it seems like he's going to do something similar in this, although from a completely different source. But in any case, I'm excited to see it. What did you think about the trailer and about my comments? Do you agree with the way I interpreted certain things, or do you disagree? Did I get something wrong? Do you have a different interpretation? If so, let me know what you think in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please like it and subscribe to the channel. Check out these other videos, and please join me on more deep dive trailer breakdowns in the future. Until next time.